This is the audience for Andrea Spencer's second speech for public speaking class. It's actually a high school classroom of students. I'm Andrea Spencer. I'm trying this morning to give a speech to you in my public speaking class. I hope and through that you will have learned a little bit about history, because I think this is American history class, am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And so I'm hoping that you'll at least learn a little bit about American history. Right. Jumbo, jambalaya, crawfish, Mardi Gras, Drew Brees. Anybody have a guess on what I might be talking about?
New Orleans.
New Orleans, that's right. Bourbon Street, New Orleans. Today my speech is really about the Vieux Carré, which is specifically the French Quarter of New Orleans. Vieux Carré simply means Old Quarter. The local people down there call it the Quarter. That's some of the sights that you might see down there. That picture was taken during the Super Bowl parade for the New Orleans Saints. So that's kind of one of my favorite things to do down there. I go to New Orleans quite often, so I know a whole lot about it, and it absolutely is one of my favorite places to go. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of history about how it started. Then a few interesting facts to me that are specifically New Orleans. And then I'll finally end with a few things that you might like to do if you ever get an opportunity to go to New Orleans. For one, the World Book Encyclopedia says that New Orleans began in 1718. It was discovered by a French explorer called John Baptiste Le Moyne. It was settled on the banks of the Mississippi River. However, it was swampy land, bred mosquitoes, and back then was yellow fever. So to populate New Orleans, they strangely, French prisoners, they offered French prisoners freedom if they would come settle in New Orleans. I guess mosquito bites and yellow fever was probably a lot better than being in prison. Now, the book, The Battle of New Orleans, what it does is it tells us that New Orleans became part of America in 1805 as part of the Louisiana Purchase. We bought it from Napoleon Bonaparte. What you also find out is New Orleans was originally French, it became Spanish, French again, and then finally American. So it had a pretty rich history before it ever became American. There's also a song, I don't know if any of you heard it, but I heard it all my life. In 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson. So that kind of helped me during American history when I learned it. Because the Battle of New Orleans, which was against the British, we did win. It was part of the battle, the War of 1812. I thought that was an interesting fact because we won with the help of some people you wouldn't think, pirates. John and Pierre Lafitte were brothers and they were pirates. They were also French. They didn't like the British either. So they helped us win this war. And have y'all studied any of this yet to know that this war was actually fought, this Battle of New Orleans was actually fought after the war had ended? Communication wasn't great back then. So over 1,000 British people lost their lives. 30 of us lost their lives for a war that was already over. I think it's pretty fascinating because I would not ever think about pirates helping win a war. So that's kind of a brief little history of New Orleans, how it began. Some other things, kind of facts that to me are weird, New Orleans, I guess, are their wording. You notice them here. The G-E-A-U-X, any word that has an O sound ends for weird in A-U-X. If you're LSU Tiger fans, go Tigers. The word right here, Bow Bridge. Now looking at that, unless you were from that area, you probably would not have a clue what that wording meant. And that last word, I'm sure everyone is looking, burgundy, like the color burgundy. Oh no. In New Orleans, it has to be pronounced burgundy, and they will laugh at you if you do not pronounce it right. So those are kind of a few interesting words, so to speak, from New Orleans. Any vampire fans in here of the movies that are going on now? few of you, do you go back as far as to remember Anne Rice from Interview with the Vampire, which was ages ago? Well, she wrote a bunch of vampire books, and she is from New Orleans. Parts of the movie that starred Brad Pitt and Tom Hanks from years ago were filmed in New Orleans. And that's a big deal down there, is vampires and voodoo and all that culture. They also have, interestingly enough, a hotel, a haunted hotel called the Hotel Montillon. The fascinating thing about the hotel, other than being haunted, is it has a carousel bar that spins around. When I first went in, I expected to see horses with bars or something spinning, but I guess they figured the drunks would fall off, so it's just normal bar down there, but it spins and it's historic. That's a great thing to visit down there. Back to the weird things, Royal Street we would call it. I heard it pronounced just this past weekend when I was down there, Royale Street. So you have Bourbon right here with all the partying. One block over, you have the street that's famous for blocks and blocks of antiques. So what I'm trying to say here is it's got such a rich culture that you can go from just an all-night party to a block over buying $1,000 antiques. And you know, the French Quarter is so much more than just Bourbon Street. I mean, there's churches, students live down there, there's a school down there, people, businesses, everything. And so that is another reason that I love it. New Orleans, according to the St. Louis Cathedral.org, is also home to the Catholic cathedral called the St. Louis Cathedral, which is the oldest continually operating Catholic cathedral in America. I wouldn't expect to find that in New Orleans. I really had figured it was up in New York somewhere, but it is in New Orleans. Now, another thing, this bar, old, dilapidated looking building that you see here, claims to be the oldest bar in America. Remember the pirates? John Lafitte? The bar, Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. There's some discrepancy of whether it is the oldest building, but from the looks of that building, I'm not really going to dispute it because it looks pretty old and run down to me, no doubt. So anyway, let's see where we've gotten to. We've done some history in New Orleans. Now, best things to do when you go to New Orleans. Number one, visit Jackson Square. The cathedral overlooks Jackson Square. There are people reading the fortunes, palm reading, arts and crafts, making their own wares. And what you see here is a man who has taken spray art. He's taken spray cans and sprayed and sprayed and sprayed, and then this torch right here to dry them. And I have a picture from there, this guy is doing, and it's amazing to know that you've taken spray cans and torch and a few scrapes and made a picture. But I got this down in 2004. Pretty proud of it though, because to me it is an original picture, and he can make 50 more, but he's never gonna make 2 of the exact same picture. There's no way you can with that kind of art right there. So that's some of the things you would see if you were just walking around Jackson Square. And it's always crowded of people too. That's one good thing that I like about it. I read this book called Louisiana, the Deep South. It told me some things, and as much as I go and love New Orleans, you can always find out more. So I found out a few things that they claim is interesting for tourists to do, especially if you've never been. And one is to go to what they call the Cafe du Monde. Cafe du Monde sells beignets and chicory. Going back again to all those weird New Orleans words, have y'all ever heard of beignet and chicory? Well, my grandson calls them French, I can't even think of the name of them right now, not French donuts, but funnel cakes. Because simply, they're these triangle-shaped donuts, deep fried and sprinkled with powdered sugar. We call them funnel cakes. New Orleans calls them beignets, chicory. Some kind of fancy coffee. I'm not a coffee connoisseur, but I have yet to hear either one of those words outside of New Orleans. This right here, Marie Laveau, again, ends in O. Notice there's not an X behind it, but you still got the EAU. Voodoo was a big religion down there to the people who first started New Orleans. It come from free people of color, Creole. That was just their religion. And for their religion, she was the big deal of their religion. She's buried at the St. Louis Cemetery, number 1. I recommend to everyone to take a tour of that cemetery. Everyone down there is buried on top of the ground because the water is so high. I told you it was marshy and all that good stuff. Well, they can't bury them in the ground, so they're all buried on top. Their cemeteries are called cities of the dead. It's worth the money to take a tour of the cemetery, to pay someone to walk you through that cemetery for 2 reasons. They're huge, and you'll get lost going through all these big tall monuments and lose your way. The second and very most important reason is this. They close their cemeteries every day. They're locked behind an iron gate. And if you want to know what it feels like to be locked in a cemetery because you didn't know that, I'll tell you all about it when I'm through with this speech. It is not very fun to be locked in a cemetery, not knowing how you're going to get out. Luckily for cell phones, but I can't imagine before cell phones, anything like that happened. So that is a must-have, and well worth the money, no doubt. For you that are interested in vampires, they also have what they call a vampire tour at night. Yeah, they're not, no one is dressed up like vampires. No one jumps out at you. Basically what it is part factual, part embellished, telling you about all the old buildings and things that have happened there that kind of make you question, could this or could this not have happened? But I assure you it's not scary. My 8-year-old grandson went on one this weekend. He was fine. I was lagging in the back of the line. He was right up there with the tour guide, not a bit scared. But it is factual, and you get to visit and do all these fun things, and it's a lot of history. When you come back, you appreciate it a lot more, I think, after going to visit these kind of places. But they have fun stuff too. They have an aquarium of the Americas down there, which of course has fish in it. But it also had an exhibit called Hurricane of the Bayou, and we all remember Katrina. Well, this exhibit, you could go inside the simulator thing like a hurricane with the winds blowing on you and kind of get just a minute feeling of what it must have felt like with the hurricane going on. And, and then, so that's kind of a day's worth of itinerary of things that you could do when you went to visit New Orleans. Like I said, brief history, a few kind of quirky facts that you're probably not going to find everywhere, and a day's itinerary. But what I want you to take from it is, of course, it's rich in history, it's good for you, it is fun, it is family friendly. I mean, there were lots of families down there, but it's a big city, and I'm sure you all know that big cities have lots of crime. I always caution everyone when you go anywhere, not just New Orleans, be smart, be careful, be aware of your surroundings. But the number one thing and the motto that we have when we go to New Orleans, we say, laissez-les bon temps rouler, which in essence means let the good times roll. Have a great time, because they don't call it the Big Easy for nothing.